The Korean War marked a bizarre era in ufology during the 1950s. A large number of U.S. soldiers and military officials claimed to have encountered disc-shaped unidentified flying objects and other potentially extraterrestrial crafts. One of the most distressing incidents was reported by Private Francis Wall. He shared his experience witnessing and attacking a UFO with his unit. While the details seemed outlandish at first, some of his claims were supported by the fact that the unit went on to develop a strange and inexplicable illness. Korean UFOs. Towards the end of the Korean War, and after its conclusion in July of 1953, dozens upon dozens of Americans reported witnessing unidentified flying objects during battle. Almost always described as flying saucers, unofficial reports counted sightings as many as 42 separate instances with more than one witness involved. Many questions have arisen about the origin of these sightings and their strange recurrence. It is highly unlikely that, even though exhausted and stressed, soldiers from all sides would somehow collectively hallucinate such specific shared experiences. The U.S. Air Force investigated the matter through Project Blue Book, which mostly discredited claims but has been criticized by enthusiasts for not delving deep enough. Furthermore, many believe that the investigative project was purposely killed before concluding, which has led volunteers to continue to investigate on their own. Initial theories about the sightings speculated that the UFOs could have been Soviet Union experiments rooted in World War II German technology on anti-gravity. For a long time, this theory was believed by many enthusiasts and held as highly likely by some open-minded researchers. However, the fall of the USSR revealed that the Soviets had also reported UFOs flying over Korea, making it unlikely that they wouldn't have recognized their own technology. Another prevailing theory suggests that the UFOs were actually Chinese vessels or devices, an argument with no evidence supporting it. Yet another particular theory claims that advanced alien life may have been interested in researching human behavior during conflict or researching human military capabilities. This could explain the increase in incidents during that period. Government attempts at discrediting Korean wartime UFO sightings have stated that 80% of these could have been explained by ordinary phenomena. Francis P. Wall. One of the most remarkable incidents from the period was discussed at length by former Private First Class Francis P. Wall in an interview with renowned UFO investigator John Zimmerman in 1987. The alleged event took place in the Iron Triangle, close to the men's station in Chorwan, about 60 miles north of Seoul. In 1951, Wall and his fellow soldiers were planning to bomb a nearby area with artillery when an unexpected craft emerged from above the hills. The GIs were beginning to fire their artillery, and the vehicle descended into the target area. During the interview with Zimmerman, Wall recalled the following, quote, "We suddenly noticed on our right-hand side what appeared to be a jack-o'-lantern come wafting down across the mountain. At first, no one thought anything about it. So we noticed that this thing continued on down to the village, to where, indeed, the artillery airbursts were exploding. It had an orange glow in the beginning. We further noticed that this object was quick, that it could get into the center of an airburst of artillery and yet remain unharmed." Reportedly, the UFO then approached them while turning on a bluish-green light that he described as, quote, "pulsating." Worried and confused, Wall asked his company commander for permission to fire at it, which he did with armor-piercing bullets from his M1 rifle. The bullets reportedly hit, causing a slamming sound comparable to metal being shot. Inexplicably, the rifle fire seemed to have a more significant effect than the artillery shots, which appeared to deflect off the craft. Wall theorized that perhaps some sort of protective shield had prevented damage from the artillery explosions, and that it had been removed or turned off upon approaching them. He went on to describe what happened in light of his attack, quote, "The object went wild, and the light was going on and off. It went off completely once, briefly, and it was moving erratically from side to side as though it might crash to the ground. Then a sound. We had heard no sound previous to this. A sound like diesel locomotives revving up. After the UFO powered up, the men witnessed what can only be described as an attack against them. The most terrifying element of Wall's witness statement, and the most confirmable due to latter health consequences, was described as follows, quote, "We were swept by some form of ray that was emitted in pulses, in waves that you could visually see only when it was aiming directly at you. That is to say, like a searchlight sweeps around and you would see it coming at you." Additional sightings. Similar UFO sightings during the war have lent credibility to Wall's story. In 1950, only months before Wall's incident, a Navy aircraft was allegedly approached by two flying discs and inspected it from just a mile away. The crew reported that a reddish glow emanated from the silver mirror-like body of the aircraft. It was unlike any craft known in the area, foreign or American. The following year, a B-29 pilot witnessed a bright light of reddish-yellow color near Chinampo. As he dropped his altitude, the light followed. 4 additional pilots would report seeing a large green ball with a red glow that turned blue when it moved across the sky soon after. The pilots had all been at very different locations, yet reported the sighting at the same time. Months later, a Navy radar located an unidentifiable flying object above the fleet, flying at 1,000 miles per hour and then hovering. A subsequent check revealed that 14 different radar operators all noticed the inexplicable signal. More B-29 pilots reported sightings over Sinuiju and Antong, with one describing a disc-like UFO appearing in his direct line of sight for 45 seconds. It reportedly circled the plane, then speedily flew away. UFO sightings were even reported at the front lines, where Sergeant Bill McCorkle and 6 of his unit members affirmed they had seen 2 silver discs approaching U.S. and enemy positions, seemingly for inspection, at an estimated speed of about 1,000 miles per hour. 2 further UFO reports came from events taking place over North Korean airspace. F-86E jet pilots observed a silver object that appeared more massive than a conventional aircraft that was only visible for 5 seconds before vanishing. Minutes later, an F-51 bomber pilot witnessed a silver UFO traveling again at about 1,000 miles per hour while twisting and turning in ways that would be impossible for a manned human aircraft. The following May, an on-duty airman got a 4 a.m. phone call frantically explaining that a bright spot in the sky had approached the ground and hovered at 2,600 feet. Further witnesses to this event described it as disc-like and stated that it seemed to have scanned the area before flying away. Another report came in on June 25th from an American base near Seoul. A disc-shaped UFO was witnessed spinning clockwise and taking off from the ground. More and more reports began pouring in of similar sightings. At the end of 1952, Lieutenant Leighton Bass witnessed a UFO flying low over Pyongyang, and even initially mistook it for an American aircraft. Yet he reported the sighting when he became convinced that its path, maneuvers, lack of any apparent propulsion method, and spherical shape were incompatible with any known human vessel. Another lieutenant independently reported seeing the same object at around the same time. In Chodo, North Korea, yet another strange phenomenon was witnessed when Marine Sergeant John Mucklick reported seeing a falling star-like object while he was on duty. It allegedly stopped mid-flight to hover and then began rocking back and forth as its color mutated from white to red. Again, his statement was independently confirmed by another soldier who saw the same thing. By July of 1953, the end of the war, there had been over 42 reported sightings in just over 37 months. Aftermath. 3 days after the particular UFO sighting described by Wall, all of the men present were evacuated by an ambulance. Paths had to be cut to haul those who weren't strong enough to walk. After finally receiving the necessary medical assistance, they were diagnosed with dysentery, and doctors were surprised to measure high white blood cell counts in each of them. UFO enthusiast and former NASA scientist Richard F. Haynes would claim, quote, they had symptoms that sounded like the effects of radiation. Not only was their initial physical reaction disturbing, but the problem allegedly persisted for months. According to Wall, he suffered from a significant permanent weight loss, digestive issues, disorientation, and even memory loss. Over the year following the war, he lost contact with most of the members in his regiment. They had jointly agreed not to report the incident through any official channels, to avoid the embarrassment of being called crazy or delusional.